Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. My guest today is a serial entrepreneur, financier, a former professional football player. He broke into the cannabis industry back in 2015 as a consultant and then began a national CBD company in 2018. The following year, he founded Blak Mar Farms, which today is present in 3 states and growing. After 10 years in professional football, he also started coffee and cigar companies, restaurants, tech firms, and has worked in construction management and nonprofits. Mr. Ruben Lindo, thanks so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today, sir.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really doing great. Look, why don't you do us a favor and back up a little bit? Tell me where you went to college, where you grew up, where'd you get your start?
So I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, Saugerties, New York. It's about 100 miles outside of New York City. My mother was looking for a place to raise a family and get us out of harm's way. So we came up here, and we were probably one of the first Black families in this all-white community. It was, beautiful time back then, though, I'll be honest with you. And then I went on to University of Buffalo. I played football at the University of Buffalo. I attended Millard Fillmore Medical College while at the University of Buffalo and got an advanced degree in biology and medical biology. After I left there and had my run in playing professional sports after my first injury, I went and got my MBA at NYU Stern. And the rest is history. You said my bio. Lovely. Thank you.
No, let's back up a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your professional football career. Where'd you play? Who'd you play with?
So I was what they call, as you said, serial entrepreneur. I was a serial tryout guy. I came in the league with Denver in '95 and was cut. Went on to play in Canada for a year. Came back from Canada to the Jets in '97. Was with the Jets in '97. Got cut. Went down to Jacksonville. Got cut. And then really just started seeing the writing on the wall, and bounced around, played arena football, went back to Canada, and then made my last run at the NFL in 2005 with the Miami Dolphins.
And you got injured a couple times along the way?
I had a knee surgery and shoulder surgery.
Oh, wow. And I'm sure back then they put you on the standard level of care, right?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Montel, I didn't. I never used opioids. I've never used an opioid because my father was a heroin addict, right? And that's a little bit of the story about me. I was scared to death of it, right? And growing up as a child in the 80s with family in the South Bronx, drugs were scary, right? It was like, and all drugs were scary to me. Watching family members have crack cocaine addiction issues, like I said, my father, and a heroin addiction. I just didn't want anything to do with it. And I believe that that's probably what enabled me to continue in my athletic career, because lo and behold, again, also having a medical background before I even got to playing pro sports, I had an understanding of the detrimental side of using standard medicine. Although I didn't use plant-based medicine, I just was terrified to use opioids. I never did.
And when did you find a personal connection with cannabis?
So I've always had a connection with it. To be honest with you, I tell people I was an original legacy guy. Even playing sports, people think, oh, you were a professional athlete, you made millions of dollars. No. I still had to supplement my income, so I always was around and involved with the plant, either bringing products in. Shipping weed from Arizona or California to New York for distribution, or overseeing grow facilities, buddies that had grow facilities, because it was a way for us to make money. And especially in the Black community, it became a little bit of subculture, but it was really a way for us to supplement our income, and growing up, it's always been medicine. I have aunts and uncles that would smoke reefer, right? They called it reefer back then, and they'd have a joint, and it always helped with their nerves. I have 2 uncles that were in Vietnam, and I remember as a kid they'd kick us out, and then they'd presumably smoke a joint, and then they had enough patience to deal with the kids for the rest of the day, right? And so it's always been around me. As a consumer, believe it or not, in 2016, I consumed my first uh, joint. I was with Mike Tyson actually at the time. Mike and I grew up very close to one another. We're about 10 minutes apart. And I was telling him how I was having issues with post concussion syndrome, and I was battling CTE, and he introduced me to CBD, and then we kind of talked about it, and then he introduced me to cannabis, and I consumed, but I don't consume to get high. I really don't. I really medicate myself with it, and I use probably every couple weeks, and it keeps me even keeled. Um, but I also consume an awful lot of CBD. I'm a big CBD consumer.
I'm a big CBD consumer also. But now you were in the business during your football career, but when did you decide to make cannabis your, you're a serial entrepreneur. You've got all kinds of businesses going on. When did you decide that maybe cannabis might be one of those things that I want to focus on?
So in 2013, I was released from prison. I went to prison for 18 months. And when I came home from prison, I couldn't find a job in traditional markets. Even having an MBA, medical background, people just didn't really want to hire a convicted felon. I met these two gentlemen at a cigar lounge, and I was actually talking to then Pro Football Hall Leonard Marshall. Len and I were on the phone, and he was telling me about this medical cannabis company that he was an investor in. I hung up the phone with him, and these two other guys started talking to me about cannabis and infrastructure and medicine. And they asked me if I would write a business plan for them and a pitch deck. So I did. At first, I was a little nervous because I was like, I can't go back to prison for this, right? Like, I just can't get caught up. And I didn't know if it was a kind of a setup, Montel, to be honest with you. And a light went off in that moment. And I realized that there was a real need in this industry for adults in the room, some business acumen, some folks that were going to look at this thing from both sides of the fence, as we say. So from the legacy and street side, but also bring that business school acumen to it. And I was really successful working for these guys out of Canada. That's when I knew in 2015, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had found probably the most rewarding career that I could have ever found. It allowed me to use my science background and business and marry the two. Um, at the time, my wife and I were really struggling, and it opened up a door for us to have financial viability. Right? I can't say that we got rich, but we definitely were able to survive and then move on to thriving in society. And um, I just didn't stop there. I asked a ton of questions. I was in boardrooms with the biggest in the industry, from the canopy grows to the Tilray executives, hydropothecary. I was in with all of them. The company that I was consulting for asked me to be their CEO. And I said, "Oh, I can't be your CEO. I'm a convicted felon." They said, "We're a privately held company. We know all about your conviction, and we want to make that part of our story." I became their CEO, led them on a just about a $30 million cap raise, and started seeing really the dark side of cannabis, right? Which is the capitalist side, where people were just in this to make money. And I really wanted to be in it to heal people and help people. So at that point, I made the decision to pivot from plant touching THC business into CBD. And I had a little bit of a vision because I knew that the farm bill was coming, and I knew that the industry was going to really shift. So we really focused, myself and two other former professional athletes, focused on putting together a brand that talked to the issues that we had. And one of the big issues that we had was anxiety. The other was pain. So what better remedy for anxiety and pain than CBD? But right at that same moment, Montel, my daughter in Canada was stricken with a rare blood disorder called aplastic anemia, severe aplastic anemia, where her body stopped producing red blood cells. she was in treatment and her hair started falling out. And she was in a very aggressive treatment that was non-therapeutic. It was all plant-based and animal genetics, and it's really what kind of saved her life. But me being in cannabis, I went right away and found folks to work with to create a shampoo for my daughter. And we created what I thought was a shampoo. It really turned out to be body butter, because what did I know about, cosmetics? And then partnered with a cosmetics team, and I just became a geek in the industry. I spent 2 years in a lab in San Diego, flying back and forth from New York to San Diego, or Toronto to San Diego, and just put together what I considered the best 100 products that you could develop, from skincare to hair care. And then we put a little twist on it, and we really started talking to the Black community and Black consumer. Again, not to not to be a segregationist, but really because that's a part of our community, the Black community. We don't know about a lot of these things, the scientific part of it, right? We know the benefits, we know the money side of it, but when you start talking about CBD and skincare and what it does, and antioxidants, and how it makes your skin radiant and can increase hair follicle growth, these things were great, and the science of it was awesome. And I just went crazy, to be honest with you, and stayed in the lab and tried to create products that helped people. And we said from 7 to 70, we wanted to help people. And lo and behold, Montel, my mom, was diagnosed with lung cancer right around this, 2 years after my daughter goes into full remission. And then at that point, I said, I know a little bit about THC and cancer. We flew my mom home from Florida, and she was probably 90 pounds. And I picked her up from the airport, and we made plans for a funeral. And on the way to the meet with the funeral director, I said to my sister and stepfather, I need to change her diet, and we're going to put her on Rick Simpson's oil. And I found a buddy who's creating Rick Simpson's oil in California. And I did the unthinkable and spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and gave my mom 3 years additional on her life. And I know that if she just stayed with the Rick Simpson's oil and kept her diet the way that we had it, she'd still be alive. I think once she made the decision to go to chemo, she gave up. Right. And that's the story in our industry. So that's the full backup story, Montel, of me and how I fell in love with this industry. And um, it's been something that's been near and dear to our heart in this office. Is we can chase fame and riches, but at the end of the day, that's all fleeting. I want to be known for my legacy, for building up community, and lifting people up, and teaching them about this.
Well, tell me a little bit about your craft cannabis company, Blak Mar Farms.
So Blak Mar Farms is a craft cultivation company. For the last 2.5 years, we focused on cultivation, and we did product development for other brands under NDA. Can't disclose those, but we worked with some of the more popular brands, and we grew high quality craft cannabis in the potency range of somewhere in 26 to 32% THC. Right, we really focused on the power side of the plant. And then one day I sat down and started talking to my growers and said, let's kind of change the narrative, right? Let's get away from creating what we consider recreational gas, and start creating products that speak to different ailments. And let's look at the different terpene profiles, and let's look at different ratios, and how do we do this? So we started going out and creating genetics, and we started doing tissue culture really early on. And we started pheno hunting and finding plants that we think were the traditional medicine side of this, and focused on it. There's not a lot of money in science and research in this industry. So we still focus on putting out a recreational product. But this year we made a pivot, And I made a decision after talking to some folks in California, and after I left MJ BizCon, said I'm not going to buy another cultivation facility. I'm not going to put any more money into it. There are guys out here that are doing it. All they need is good SOPs and genetics, and we're going to become a brand. And we're going to put out 7 SKUs, and we're going to focus on putting 7 SKUs in emerging economies. And then in flooded economies, we're going to pick the lost leaders, and we're going to speak to a demographic that no one speaks to. And that's the legacy to legal side. Right, so we can talk about that because we were a legacy brand. Blak Mar Farms was known from coast to coast for our products and our flower before we got our license in Michigan. And once we got licensed in Michigan, um, the emphasis and I think the ethos of our company changed. So this year I sat down and said, look, I'm really done chasing capital. I'm done trying to raise a ton of capital. We're going to circle the wagons. We created a campaign, and it's elevate the culture and uplift communities. We created a subculture within that, and we have a campaign right now going on that's buy weed from brothers like you used to, right? And it's really just to kind of play on the fact that there aren't a lot of legacy to legal brands that can go and really have a multi-state presence, right? And that's what we're doing. Matter of fact, our program is very unique because out of every product SKU we sell, we try and do either $1 or $2 goes directly back into that community where that dispensary is. Now, $1 or $2 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you get into volume sales and the other thing too, Montel, let me back up. We created these products so that they stay middle of the road. We want everyone to be able to afford them. We want people to come in and have access to clean quality genetics and clean quality products. We got away from the sugar based and went to pectin based gummies. We got away from ethanol and using chemicals in our solvents to chemical and solventless extracts. So we're really focusing on the clean side. And then I took it a step further and said, even if we lose money, we're going to be a sustainable company. So everything that we do comes in glass or renewable plastics. We don't use Mylar bags. Even everything all the way down to our tops are biodegradable hemp lids. So we really have focused on living and being true to what I always say is we can't have, if we're not good to the planet, we would never have the plant. And that's just how I feel about it. Even if I lose margin and profit, I'd rather lose profit and know that we're doing good than rake in profit and continue to damage the world.
You're starting to produce, or you've been producing, an annual networking gala in New York. Tell me a little bit about the event and the mission behind it.
So the idea initially was we started this event in California, and it used to be called In the Clouds. And we had people like Matt Barnes and Dwayne Martin and a lot of celebrities host them. And then we realized that all those were just really get together, hang out, the BS and party crowd. When we came back to New York, the first thing that I realized was people aren't getting the information. They're getting a lot of conjecture and a lot of, what I call false information in the industry from a lot of people who were just misleading, right? And have been in the industry as long as I have, we decided to create Herbn Couture luxury cannabis networking dinner. So what we do is we bring you in to a venue. The past 2 years, we were in a converted barn. It was lovely. You come to the event. The first thing I do is I give you a pen and a notebook. That's what you get when you check in. And people always ask me, why do you give a pen and a notebook? And I tell them that's how I made my career, with a pen and a notebook. I've asked questions and I still have these notebooks and I can refer back to notes. But often when you go to these networking mixers, the first thing you do is you don't have a pen, you don't have a business card. And a lot of this was focused on folks who are trying to break into the industry, who may or may not have money So a lot of people didn't even have business cards. So we tell them like this network is the notebook is the beginning of your network, and your network is your net worth, right? And that's how I start the event. It's an hour and 20-minute cocktail, so you just mingle, and I feed you really well. We bring you in a room, and then you eat again. We have we don't infuse any of the food. Our company, Blak Mar Farms and Herbn Couture, we have our own brand of salad dressings and dipping sauces that we provide. We just want people to consume responsibly. We were also one of the first events that would allow you to consume on premise legally in the state of New York while you're, at our event. So people would step outside, consume, come back inside. We sit down, we eat. We honor. I pick 3 individuals every year that I feel that are out there doing the work in this industry, not just talking the talk. And I always look for folks that aren't getting their flowers, Montel. That's honestly how we got together here, because I've watched the work that you've done. I've been watching you on TV since way back when. I won't age myself, but just in being introduced to you and your brand in this podcast, I I said, we should talk to Montel. This year, we're honoring 3 individuals that are just amazing. Brendan Robinson out of New Jersey, Roz McCarthy from the Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Roz and I came in this industry together. We're the two only Black people at a lot of these conferences at the executive level, and they'd always stick us in these back hallways, Montel. I swear to you.
But I've been doing this since the year 2000, so I know
Uh-huh.
exactly what you're talking about. I've been doing this for 22 years, and it wasn't until 2017 that we actually started having light shine on us. But go right ahead.
So Roz McCarthy is I'm honoring Roz this year with a Lifetime Achievement Award
That's great.
because of what she's done. And then Antoine Mordican out of Alabama. Um, Antoine owns Black Native Cultivation. His story is amazing. In the state of Alabama, he applied for the license. He had one of the highest scores, and they still denied him a license. Right? We know why. Um, his house mysteriously burnt down, and then they raided his farm a week and a half after he lost everything in his house. And he wasn't even growing cannabis. He just grew plants and vegetables. Antoine has been a mentee of mine for about 18 months. And I was conflicted because I didn't want people to think, oh, well, he's just awarding, his mentee. But when I put it out to the committee, the past winners, and they all heard his story, they said we got to bring him in and honor him. So we're honoring him this weekend. We do this annual event. This is the third one. Next year, it's going to be a little bit different because it's just going to be an awards dinner. We're not going to do the networking part of it because I think that the networking side of it, people have that down now, right? There's enough events where people can go to and network. You can still come and mingle, but I really want to focus on giving out awards, and we're going to expand it to 5 awards. We do an award in education and science, social justice, and social and economic justice, and then the lifetime achievement. Next year, we're going to add it to multimedia and influence. So, and people are excited when they get these awards because, again, it's not often that we're given our flowers in this industry, especially the people who roll up their sleeves and do the work.
Sure. Now, what are your thoughts on how other legacy operators like yourself should be given opportunities to enter the legal space? Because we are still fighting the idea, the fact that you by yourself alone, that me, African Americans represent, I think it's less than 4% of the leadership in this industry. What do you think about opening the doors a little bit more, and what this industry really needs to do in opening the doors?
Montel, thank you for that question. That's my platform. And I always said, like, when I came into this, I want to be the Jackie Robinson. But really, I don't want to be the Jackie Robinson. I want to be the Satchel Paige, right? I want to be the guy that made the way for Jackie Robinson. But, the truth of the matter is we need more education. I think that the people who who close the door on folks that look like us don't understand that we run robust enterprises and businesses in the legacy market, right? So if we were able to bring that knowledge and our expertise, that's what makes Blak Mar so successful, is we have that knowledge and we can bring it into the industry. Look, we come with customers, we come with SOPs, we come with protocol, so we're able to transition if we're given the chance. And I think that the stigma still exists around the plant. And you know, I I have a T-shirt that we just launched, and it says "There's no SOP for culture." I think that if the industry really learned to embrace the cultural side of this, it'd be a no-brainer to have folks that look like you and me and other legacy operators come in and bring their expertise to help grow this industry. I mean, look, alcohol couldn't be what it is without the bootleggers, right? I mean, it just wouldn't. It would never have been what it is today
But when
without.
you take a look at the alcohol industry in America, I think it looks pretty much like almost the same footprint as the cannabis industry. It is, the number of African Americans who own brands and own distribution networks for alcohol is probably no greater than what's happened in this community.
Yeah,
And where different alcohol wasn't built on the backs of African Americans, but cannabis in so many ways was built on the back of brown and black people. And
yeah,
for us to
absolutely.
be excluded is tantamount to literally, honestly, having an industry that literally is as full of shit as it has been in the last 5 or 6 years.
Man, Montel, thank you for. I love how you said that. Now you just opened the door for me to really say what it is, right? Ultimately, what we see and what we're experiencing is just the exact thing that is the black eye of America, which is systemic racism. If we, it all starts with socioeconomics, right? And when you really take a step back and look at this industry was built on the backs and on the at the liberty and the cost of black men, right? Not just anybody,
But
specifically black men.
I mean, I just don't, no question. We can look at right now is the number of arrests since 1937 for cannabis in America. I think probably 70% of all those arrested for cannabis have been African American. So it's clear. And that didn't just help build this industry, that helped build the industry of incarceration. I mean, I've looked at cannabis as nothing more than a re-enslavement tool because they utilize this to fill the prisons that were commercial prisons across this country. And yet, when conversations of equity come about, most people kind of put their head down. Well, yeah, well, our company really supports equity. Yeah, well, let's see how many people you have working in your company of color. Well, truthfully, you end up finding out that less than 1% of them or 4% of them are people of color. So, I mean, do you think and anticipate that at some point in time? Well, first off, we just heard the recommendations, I guess, from DOJ to declassify, or no, not declassify, to reclassify cannabis. I want to know your views on that, whether or not it should be reclassified or declassified.
Right.
And number two, um, some of the pushback on declassifying is the fact that a lot of municipalities use this as a way to fill the ranks of their prisons.
Yeah, yeah. So the my thought on reclassify, declassify is or deschedule, reschedule is the same as I had when we were talking about um, legalization of the plant in the very beginning days when we started talking about legalization and social equity, right? You touched on 2 points. I think social equity has become one of the most overused terms in our industry, like,
Bullshit term.
right?
Yeah.
And when you look at it, when you talk about the prison industrial complex, we know what it is. You mentioned it. 80% of all drug arrests were for possession, not even sales, possession of the plant. 60% of those in New York State were UPMs, unlawful possession of marijuana. Right. So again, if you really want to talk about the gateway drug, yeah, sure, cannabis was a gateway drug to your prison.
Jail.
Yeah, prison industrial system. But when we talk about the reschedule, deschedule, it's like, does the United States want to have a truth and reconciliation moment, Montel? No,
No,
they don't.
no.
Because that's why they keep talking about reschedule. If they deschedule, they'd have to have a truth and reconciliation. They'd have to admit that 80% of their jails, these federal penitentiaries that are filled with folks with cannabis convictions, they got to go home. You're losing industry now, right? You're touching on things that really shine a black eye, no pun intended, on this great country that you fought for, right? That my grandfathers and uncles fought for. Um, but at the end of the day, they don't want to have a truth and reconciliation moment. So we can keep playing the game with reschedule, deschedule, but until they deschedule cannabis and they admit that the propaganda machine was wrong, they admit to the things that they did to the black and brown community under the guise of war on drugs, then we can't have the conversation. But rescheduling it does nothing more than push the buck further down the road and puts us in a position where we're still fighting for safe banking. That's another thing that I've publicly fought for. I've testified in both Congress and in Senate in New York State and Assembly. And until they can prove to me that a banker is going to go to jail for banking cannabis money, then it's all BS,
Right.
right? And not once has a banker ever gone to jail. By the way, where does the state of New York bank our cannabis tax money? They bank it with the Bank of America, M&T Bank, and Key Bank, right?
State will
So
do that, but they won't allow you to do that.
right, because we're too risky, right? And this is my testimony on Capitol Hill. I said we will entertain taking cryptocurrency before you entertain cannabis currency. And cryptocurrency is created by a kid who's 15 years old in between playing first person shooter games and watching Pornhub. Right? Like at the end of the day, that's you rank our industry below that mentality. And when I said that, Crystal People Stokes kind of sat up. A lot of them did, and they started asking me real questions. And I said, look, the banking industry has also become predatory because you and I both know as black businessmen, it's real hard for us to bank. It is super hard for us to bank. Now add the level of cannabis on top of it. I can't even tell you the number of times that I've been, SAR'd and AML'd for simple transactions, right? But again, here it all boils down to this, Montel. An educated consumer makes for a sophisticated market, right? So the lack of education and the lack of time that we have to educate these folks, and I've said this to Cory Booker's team, if you're going to go up there and fight for safe banking, understand what this industry is going through. Understand who is being harmed in this harm reduction game, right? Again, when the harm reduction becomes the harm, what are we doing? We're just pushing the buck down the road. And that's what they're doing with reschedule, deschedule. It's the same mentality. It's give us a little bit, get people excited. And I heard somebody say today, they were all excited. Oh, safe banking is going to get re-envisioned. It's not going to get re-envisioned until they get real about the reconciliation with the people and all of the people, not just black and brown people. It's all the people.
Well, part of this goes back to something you said earlier: education of the masses. Number one, because I think that's one of the biggest disservices this industry has done, is that though we spent all this time doing a lot of B2B work, trying to do B2B work, but we've failed miserably in B2C. We don't spend as much time educating the consumer the way they should be educated so that the consumer can demand access to the product. I mean, you take a look at what the pharmaceutical industry does. They educate you every day. You turn on your television right this second, and within the next 10 minutes, you're going to see 5 ads for 5 different medicines. Don't even know what they do. But you'll remember some of the names because you see the ad over and over and over again. And why do they do that? So that when you walk into your doctor's office, you'll say to your doctor, have you ever heard of this drug, such and such and such and such? Oh, yeah, wait, I got some samples right here. I'll give you a sample. Why? Because homeboy came by and gave him a couple samples to give him so he'd get a kickback when he makes sure that you ask for it, a prescription for it.
Right.
Well, why are we not educating the public so that the public is demanding more access to cannabis? Cannabis has spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to go public, trying to figure out how to get more investment from a B standpoint, but we're failing to really pay attention to the C aspect, which is the consumer. And, I think one of the things you said earlier, about going after first, you were developing phenotypes and types of cannabis that were in the high THC range. Yeah, I think that we recognize this year alone that the biggest consumer audience that we have out there right now, the audience that we should be going after, is baby boomers. But we
Talk
don't do
about
that. And no baby boomers wants to have a 35% THC. No,
talk.
they have difficulty walking to begin with. I don't want to give, my grandmother, or you don't want to give your grandmother some, 32, 33% THC product. When she gets up out of the chair, she's going to fall down and break a hip. Calm down. Let's get those numbers back down to reality. Let's start doing what we should have been doing, and that's doing more formulations of combinations of THC, CBD, more investigative work and research on, what are the viable, terpenes that
Yeah,
we've had research on terpenes for 40 years, not just cannabis for terpenes, but terpenes exist in any plant that has a color.
right.
So we
It's
don't even do that.
I'm so it's so rewarding to have this conversation. This morning I was laying in bed and I literally was thinking like, and I have it on my Google search. Like I need to look at more than just limonene, right, as a
Of course.
terpene, and I need to start really understanding the terpenes because um,
Humilene. People don't even understand that we have not even identified all of the terpenes that are existed in cannabis. And so, how can we dare? Like right now, I know you have a CBD line out across the country, and of course, if people want to have some information and get some stats, where would they go to have access to your CBD line?
So right now we took it offline. It's coming back online. It's Phoenix Nutraceutical. It's phoenixcbd.com. It'll be back up here in the next couple weeks. We just had to do some rebranding and retooling. A lot of what you're saying is right. We've also pared down. Our brand got a little confusing for folks with 101 different SKUs. We're really focusing on health SKUs right now. I do, I'm not giving up on the cosmetic line, but we're really focusing on the things. We're coming into some unprecedented times, right? And let's not even, we could talk politically, but the world is going to be on edge again. We're going to be on edge, right? So we're
Well, you're right. Wait, the world is on edge, and a lot of the world has recognized. I think in the last year alone, way over 100 different countries have pulled out of the UN ban of distribution and of hemp internationally. So,
yeah,
I mean, the United States is lagging far behind in this. We are literally, dragging along behind the pig, trying to figure out how we can get more access, where countries like Isle of Man, Spain, Germany, South Africa, a couple other African nations, Lesotho, South Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, countries all over the world have recognized the fact that Israel, that cannabis could serve as a geriatric drug, and several countries are actually utilizing it that way because of the high cost of pharmaceuticals. They know that some people who have changed over to, or switched over to using cannabis can actually bring down the number of pharmaceuticals that they actually purchase.
we
So, yeah, go ahead.
we consult. I'm actually consulting right now for Zimbabwe for the government in Zimbabwe. It started out as a parliament leader contacted me after after them recognizing that there is a couple things that I talk about that this industry affords them. And I'm not just talking about THC. I'm talking about the total viability of the plant, CBD and cannabis, right? And one of the things, hemp and cannabis, one of the things that a lot of people don't even realize, they realize it globally, but here in the United States, we're so focused on some of the wrong things, right? And one of the biggest things is hemp production can decrease can decrease um, your vulnerabilities to carbon credit exposure, right? Which is a big deal right now. Um, One of the things that hemp does is if you utilize a hemp program in the right way, you can increase your GDP by 1.5 times. in the first year.
I mean, but
Right?
my brother, if we were to just stop and have a serious, realistic conversation about hemp in America, every single municipality building's roof should have hemp on it. Why? Because hemp sequesters more CO2 than almost any other plant on the planet. We could be
Yes.
growing hemp in all of the public spaces that on the sides of the same way they used to do in the Northeast, have vines growing on the sides of building. We could have hemp growing on the sides of building and sequester more CO2 than any other plant that we have available. Not only that, we can then take that plant after we trim it down and cut it down. We can use all the bio waste for everything from hemp wood to hempcrete. They're using hemp. There's over 2,500 different uses for the plant that could actually take us back to a time when the world actually, was pretty much focused on hemp. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that, hemp is what made the world go round in the 16, 17, 1800s. This was the number one product that we grew in the United States. All of
Hmm.
our forefathers grew it. All of our uniforms that were made for the Revolutionary War were made out of hemp. The only thing that the North and South had in common during the Civil War was the fact that they all wore hemp uniforms.
Right.
All the canvas that we use for sails, for ropes, for wagons going west, all were made from hemp. It's so ignorant and so stupid that we decided to let racism drive economy rather than looking at it the way they should have. So,
Yeah, thank you, Montel. The
sorry.
Hearst. I always tell people the Hearst family had their finger on the pulse of creating this war on drugs because their newspaper production around the country and then globally really impacted us, right?
Their
Because
furniture production. A lot of people don't know. The Hearst family was chopping down trees for furniture, for wagons, for wood back then. They're the reason. Most people don't understand that Anslinger, who was the proponent of the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, was funded by Hearst and DuPont. Why? Because when you go back before 1937, 1910, 1920, lots of lanterns, lots of hemp oil was used. As a matter of fact, the first car that Henry Ford made could have run off of hemp oil.
yeah,
People don't know that. They thought it was off of gasoline. No, it could have run off of hemp oil. He made an entire car out of hemp, which is
yeah,
really kind of crazy that we won't acknowledge that even today, the stupidity involved. But there's a reason why, and that reason why it became the re-enslavement tool. When the chains came off from the plantations, they put the chains back on when they went into prisons, and they needed to have something to make sure that they could get us in. And there's even literature that has been written about the fact that if you go back in the early 17 1800s, how the hell do you think you had a big strapping black man like you go out in the field and pick cotton all day and get beat upside your head and not protest? They
right,
were giving you hemp. They
right,
were giving you hemp products, keeping you a little bit higher. I mean, people don't get it.
right.
So I'm with you. I'm sorry. I got to get off my horse here for a second.
Now, listen, preach, man. Because again, you said it, education, right? This conversation is probably one of the best interviews that I've done because we got into the education and you can get into the weeds of the industry. Having this conversation and really having the conversation from an educated standpoint changes the dialogue, changes the narrative, right? And it all goes back to what we all know, right? The racism in America. But at the end of the day, the reason why we don't educate consumers is because educated consumers would mean the lawmakers can't pretend to be ignorant anymore, right? So, and I always say that you've heard me say this and I'll say it again, educated consumers make for a sophisticated market. I didn't say educated businesses, educated consumers. Just take a look at Apple. Take a look at Apple. Apple has us so conditioned. You either have an iPhone or an Android, right? That's it. That's all you have. And if you have an iPhone, you can tell me everything that iPhone could potentially do. Why? Because it's in the commercials. Why? Because they tell us what it can do. Well, imagine what we could do if we told people and we used the same tactic, like you said, and we shared this information and we told people using CBD does this, using THC does this. Um, and really break it down to to educate the consumer, nobody would touch opioids. Nobody would go to
And
lab-based.
not only that, but if we start to expand the fact that there is knowledge already out there about all the other minor cannabinoids, from CBG to CBN to CBC. There's so many different, and then there's the acid version of every single one of them.
Yeah.
So we really are doing I think an injustice, a disservice to the industry by not ensuring that some of our revenue, that we get goes to education. And some people are going to say, well, but you're not allowed to advertise. I'm not talking about educate. Look, a rising tide will lift all boats. There's enough money in this. And we haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to hemp yet. We haven't even
Right.
scratched the surface when it comes to cannabis. We're like the Wright brothers pushing that wooden plane down a hill. They haven't even looked at jets yet. We got 10 years from now, hemp is going to be probably one of the biggest, export import crops in the world, again, as it should be. But
Right.
it's going to take us 10, 12 years to get there, because we need to have a generation of assholes drop out of the way and get out of the way and allow this business to reflourish again.
And that's kind of my focus and my shift, right? I've become a carbon sequestration consultant. We have a store right here in the village of Saugerties, New York. We're one of the first in New York State to have hemp fiber siding. Our store has hemp fiber siding. The owner of the building is a very good friend of mine and allowed me to do that. We didn't even use the heat in that building in the dead of winter, because it was our value 24 right off the press, right? So understanding this, we did research with hemp as biofuel. I self-funded a small research. We were going to try and power a Tryon supercar in Vegas with hemp. We just couldn't get the octane where it needed to be. I just shifted and I just had a conversation with a bunch of folks and said, hey, look, in Africa, we should be looking to create hemp as a biofuel to utilize all this farm equipment that we're talking about bringing over there to do biodynamic farming.
How about we feed the continent with hemp seed protein? We know that hemp seeds are one of the highest rated protein plants on the planet. Just like a chia seed or any of the other superfoods, hemp is a superfood. Why not start feeding that continent that has so much issues with, making sure that their people have enough to eat? We could do that, and you could do that cheaply, but we don't. It's again, there are a lot of ulterior motives for a lot of things that happen in this world, and that is one that I don't think people want to let the cat out of the bag. Again, if people want to get more information about your company, Blak Mar, or what you're doing, where would they go?
They can go to blakmarfarms.com, BLAKMAR farms, FARMS.com. They can follow me on social media. I'm at RunFast on Twitter, and Ruben J. Lindo on Facebook, and Ruben Lindo and Blak Mar Farms on all social media platforms.
Cool. And here I'm going to run out of time real quick, so I want to know what's next for you. What you got? What do you got planned?
So we have the event this weekend, and then we're gearing up for a November launch of our new products in Michigan. So look for us in Michigan. We have about 20 outlets in Michigan, from Ann Arbor all the way to Detroit. And then beginning of the year, next year, we're looking to be in 15 states with our product in medical and in recreational dispensaries.
Super. Well, we will be looking for it. I'm in 2 states right now, so I'll look every place that we cross paths.
Thank you, Montel. It was a pleasure, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. You were one of my mom's favorite on TV.
Oh, I
So
appreciate that, my friend. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Look
thank you
forward.
for thank you for having us, and I look forward. Look, the invitation's always there. Anytime I have an event, please, if you can make it, I'd love to have you.
Yeah, I'm
These
so
type.
sorry I can't make this weekend. I'm actually filming one of my shows in Dallas, outside of the Dallas area. I do a show that's called Military Makeover, where we actually make over the homes of deserving veterans. And I'm going to be in Dallas this weekend as we finish up the makeover of a home of a very deserving veteran who was wounded, got blown up in a IED, or no, sorry, rocket propelled grenade that hit his military transport vehicle and severely injured him. But he has literally showed the tenacity and the voraciousness of that soul and has really bounced back well. So I'm really looking forward to being this weekend. But keep inviting me, and let's see if we can connect somewhere.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Montel, and thank you for your service too, by the way.
Absolutely, my friend, and thank you for what you do, and thank you all for tuning in and making sure you stay tuned with Just Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.